Welcome to the 74th episode of Blueshirt Bandwidth. I am your host, Joe Fortunato, joined, as always, by my co-host, Eric Cohn, and occasionally by our third wheel, Chip. Chip, how are you today?
I'm swell. How are you?
Swell. I don't know if I'd say I'm swell. Eric, how are you?
I'm doing fine. Thank you.
Fine? Just fine?
Yeah, I'm just fine.
Yeah, not really a positive time in Rangers world at all, actually. So I guess this is where we're at. Things are so bleak that we brought Chip for.
When was the
relief.
last time it was a positive time in Rangers world?
Oh, has there ever been a truly positive Blueshirts Bandwidth?
That is a good question.
I don't think so.
They're truly positive. No, I think there were definitely some hopeful and optimistic episodes.
Sure.
But, you know, the office quote of "I wish there was a way of knowing that you're in the good old times before you're out of them" kind of thing. We never really had. We weren't doing a show during any of the good old times. We started doing this on the other side of the loss to the Panthers in 24.
74 weeks ago.
Joe, did we cause this?
We could have caused this. It wouldn't surprise me if we did. It appears that every evil we have ever put out into the world, including something we're going to talk about today, you can go back and listen to it and be like, Adam Fox isn't going anywhere. What the fuck is wrong with all of you? Like, that was me saying that a month ago, Eric, 6 weeks ago.
Sounds about right.
And This is where we are. So we've brought on Chip for a couple of reasons. The first is a scapegoat. It's Chip's fault. I want to make that abundantly clear. And we just like having him around. Are we on video?
We're on video.
We are using actually what I look like.
We are using
not Chris Drury.
Shut the fuck up. We are using AI to hide what Chip actually looks like into this grotesque human being. We had to put it together really quickly. I know this isn't what a normal human looks like, but it's what we have working with us. We will get the technology better. Go ahead, Chip. You were going to say something before I cut you off.
No, I was just going to say, I'm not Chris Drury, but that's just deep fake. I really am Chris Drury.
It's deep fake. What is the Chinese AI? Deep seek? I don't know. What is it? Eric, you should know this off the tip of your...
I do not. It's DeepSeek sounds right. Yeah.
I would Google it, but I don't want the FBI at my door.
This is...
Again.
Yeah, again, correct. Yeah. After... And honestly, I will be calling the FBI there when you fuck up the Vincent Trocheck trade, so don't worry. Although I do actually have some positive thoughts about that, believe it or not. Anyway, let's just do a little bit of housekeeping. BlueshirtPanther.com, $85 a year for all your ad-free access to the New York Rangers. Chip/Chris Drury has been putting up a shitload of My Trade Proposals Suck. They are excellent. They don't suck, the stories. We have articles up there. Chris has been killing it. Roberto with the Discord. We'll get to that in a minute. Chip is covering for me. I'm traveling for work, so he is doing the Joe's Reaction of the Week this Friday. All these things that you get access to for that $85. It is well spent. All of it goes into my pocket, and I am trying to become an oil oligarch. So just got finished doing taxes. It was not pretty. Anyway, $40 a year gets you access to our Discord, gets you access to the community tier. You can ask questions in the comment thread that Eric puts up every single week. You can hear those questions over the course of this show. You hear it every single show. Sometimes we like them. We compliment you. Sometimes we hate them. We yell at you. Sometimes it brings up conversations that make Eric and I fight each other. It just kind of is what it is. Blueshirtbanter.com is the website. Facebook.com/BlueshirtBanter. Please like us, subscribe over there. YouTube.com/BlueshirtBanter, same thing. Subscribe. And then Spotify and iTunes, 5 stars. Leave a nice comment. We love when you guys leave us comments, especially the comments that talk about how much better Chip and I are than Eric. Those are good. So we'd like to see more of those. Episode number 74.
74. There are two Rangers who have worn 74. I know you know who one of them is, and that probably should be the person that this episode is named after, so why don't you just go ahead and tell me that?
Matthew the Thumb Rempe.
That is incorrect.
That is incorrect. Vitaly Kravtsov.
Vitaly Kravtsov.
Vitaly Kravtsov, or 2021 to 2023.
Oh, I was thinking we did the
yeah.
What is wrong with me?
We did. That was last
week,
week, 73.
Right.
Which will come up again in the Ombudsman report in a moment here. Joel Bouchard in 2004, who at the end of his career, having spent time in Calgary, Nashville, Dallas, Phoenix, New Jersey, came to the Rangers was with Pittsburgh, also came to the Rangers in 2002, 2003, played 28 games for them in 2003, 2004, which is when he wore this number. He scored a goal and 7 assists for 8 points. And on the other side of the lockout year, finished up his career with the New York Islanders. So I think we got to go, considering last week we went with the Matt Rempe vibes episode. I think we have to go with the Vitaly Kravtsov vibes episode.
But wait a minute,
this one.
There were 2 sets of vibes with Kravtsov. There was the hopeful vibe. Is that what we're doing now?
How long were there hopeful vibes with Kravtsov?
No, in the beginning there was hopeful vibes.
In the beginning, there are hopeful vibes with just about anyone that is taken. But I think even people recognized at the time that pick was a bit of a reach.
For sure.
And we did try to talk ourselves into there's skill there. They're taking a big upside bet. And as it just turned out, it was a very terrible idea.
Which is relatively fitting for the podcast that we're doing right now, actually.
I think so, yeah.
Because we're all talking ourselves into the Vincent Trocheck trade not being a complete piece of shit.
The Vitaly Kravtsov disappointment podcast definitely feels apropos to that.
He was also yelled at by Chris Drury reportedly with the Hartford Wolfpack, so it fits even more.
Perfect.
So here we go. So the Vitaly Kravtsov episode, I don't know, my mind's on Matt Rempe, I don't know.
The guy who they drafted because Adam Boqvist is off the board.
It's funny. We've talked about this before. I was less upset about the Kravtsov pick, mostly because the Elias Anderson pick was still infuriating me. So little did I know, he went to Vancouver, went on waivers, chance for Chris Drury to do the funniest thing ever. He did not. Now we still hear the name because this is what we decide to do to ourselves. Eric, why don't you bring our good friend Charlie up for the report, and then we will move on to the meat of the show, the chip of the show, as they would say.
The podcast Ombudsman Report for Blueshirt Bandwidth, episode 73, where, of course, each week Charlie listens to the podcast and corrects the record on anything that we get wrong, starting with Canadian fans. When discussing the Team USA victory over Team Canada in the women's gold medal game at the 2026 Milan Olympics, Joe mentioned an embarrassing tweet by Team Canada. I still can't believe that they tweeted this. It is shared there in the report, and it says, "Shines just as bright." Considering how much whining Canadians have done in the week since their losses, let's watch Canadian fans enjoying the other golden goal. And there's some videos in there for you to enjoy.
Can I mention something super quickly? You and I fucked up big. We did not talk about the Gaudreau situation after the gold medal game.
You're right. We did not.
So let me just say now, we don't have to rehash all of it. Very special moment, very emotional moment. It was really cool for the team to do that. Johnny Gaudreau was in our hearts. Having them go into the crowd to get his kids was it's kind of what sports is all about, quite honestly. So I'm remiss not to mention that. I don't know how we missed it. We were just moving at 1,000,000 miles a minute. It was actually on my notes, and then I think I got really mad about John Cooper and completely forgot about it.
Yeah.
But I wanted to rectify that situation right now.
There's the photo of Johnny Gaudreau blocking or deflecting the Nathan McKinnon shot of like the ghost of Johnny Gaudreau doing it. And all I could think of is like, well, Quinn Hughes definitely saw that happen, right? Because Quinn Hughes sees ghosts.
I didn't see. I thought the photo was a little weird.
It is a little weird. I'm not going to lie. I found it a little weird, but like
it was better to be like Gaudreau was with them. I don't want to see it necessarily. He's not even blocking the shot correctly in the photo, but
so be it.
To each their own.
Episode 73. This was declared the Matt Rempe Good Vibes episode. For all of Rempe's good vibes, when he was on the New York Rangers roster during the 2024 postseason run, he recorded only a single assist in 67 minutes and 20 seconds of total ice time across 11 games, while not playing more than 8 minutes and 33 seconds in any game that ended in regulation. He did manage to have 38 hits and 4 block shots. Women's gold. Eric and Joe are apparently not well versed in the success of the United States women's hockey team. Since women's hockey was introduced in 1998, they have won gold in the inaugural 1998 tournament and in 2018. And you can watch highlights of both of those in the report. I will note, thanks to the people owning those copyrights for making it incredibly hard to share Olympic content. Really enjoyed putting the report together this week. Gold medal game. The episode referenced how Team Canada outplayed Team USA at the gold medal game. In fact, Canada severely outchanced Team USA by a margin of almost 2-1. Total scoring chances, Canada 45, US 23. Team USA overtime winners. Eric said the Team USA, different versions, scored 4 golden goals in a year's time. It's actually in 14 months because the final of the World Junior Championships are always on January 5th. Charlie includes the videos of all 4 golden goals. NHL Olympics. Joe and Eric couldn't seem to remember how long it had been since the NHL had players in the Olympics, and when Henrik Lundqvist won the gold medal. The NHL has now sent players to 6 Olympics: 98 Nagano, 2002 Salt Lake City, 2006 Torino, 2010 Vancouver, and 2014 in Sochi, plus, of course, these most recent ones in Milan. Henrik Lundqvist led Sweden to the gold medal during his rookie season in February 2006, beating Jaromir Jagr's Czech team in the semifinals to win the only Olympic tournament, including NHL players, that featured neither Team USA nor Team Canada in the medal round. Canada 5-on-3. While John Cooper is complaining that 3-on-3 isn't real hockey, Canada had a chance to score against only 3 American defenders with 5 skaters on the ice. Not only was Team USA down to only 3 skaters, 2 of them were Vincent Trocheck and JT Miller. After Dylan Larkin and Brock Nelson killed almost a minute of the power play with 2 clears, Trocheck and Miller came out against Cale Makar, Connor McDavid, Macklin Celebrini, Sam Reinhart, and Nathan McKinnon. Fun fact, the minute 43 2-man advantage was 2 seconds longer than the 3-on-3 overtime. First time, Rangers fans are used to a team with Mike Sullivan behind the bench going into a defensive shell with a lead in a huge game. As the Banter Twitter account reminded you during Team USA's 4 Nations face-off win over Team Canada last year, here is that tweet. Mike Sullivan and John Tortorella behind the bench as we turtle and try to protect a 2-1 lead in front of the best goalie in the world. Feels like we've seen this movie before. That was February 15th, 2025. 16 seeds. There have actually been 2 16 seeds to win a game in the NCAA tournament. 2019, it was University of Maryland, Baltimore County, shocking Virginia to become the first. And in 2023, Purdue lost to Fairleigh Dickinson. Curiously, both 1 seeds that lost to a 16 made the national championship game the following year, with Virginia winning their only championship in 2019, and Purdue running into the buzzsaw that was the 2024 UConn Huskies, losing in the final. Adam Fox leaving. We'll discuss this in a bit. Quote, if you're Adam Fox and you hear this, how do you not take this as an FU? The evening after this podcast dropped, Adam Fox sounded fairly noncommittal about staying with the Rangers. We will, of course, discuss that. Herb Brooks, the story of Herb Brooks' dad telling him that the 1960 Olympic team cut the right player is one that has been told by Brooks himself, saying, quote, my dad said Coach Riley cut the right guy, didn't he? So that is the truth. Olympic performance of Miller. Joe said that JT Miller was, quote, playing 2 levels above in the Olympics like I effing said he was going to. While the puck somehow stayed out of the net while JT Miller was on the ice, he was bad in the Olympics, playing at a points percentage clip of only 15%. Trocheck, on the other hand, was pretty good and played the role that he was asked to play pretty well. And finally, philosophers Trey Parker and Matt Stone. Finally, Eric concluded the episode discussing the creators of South Park's contribution to patriotic playlists everywhere. The classic, of course, America, fuck yeah. But in the spirit of ripping on Canada, let's not forget their earlier work. And he includes a video where you can, of course, watch Blame Canada. And that concludes the Ombudsman Report.
All right, now we have to get into the shitty part of the show, which is the news about the New York Rangers. Chip, you're the guest. You know what? Actually, I'm taking this back. I'm not even giving you the opportunity. Let's start with the breaking news. The breaking news is JT Miller's on the IR. I was in the process of victory lapping on Twitter because I said this was going to happen, but it does appear there is pretty convincing evidence that JT Miller was injured in the game last night. We are recording on Tuesday, it's worth noting. So Monday night, he fell and then got hit in the back of the head with the puck. Jokes aside, I hope he's okay because it was pretty clear that he got popped. He was definitely hurting on the ice. So um, there was something going on. Didn't stop him from speaking to the media. We'll talk about that in a minute as well. But JT Miller's on the IR. I'd honestly be astounded if we saw him the rest of the year, quite frankly. There's just no reason to. The Rangers are in the business of losing hockey games right now. I saw somebody on Facebook, on our Facebook page, commented, the Rangers have gotten 4 points in their last 3 games. This has to stop. And they're absolutely correct. They can't keep this up. Like, you can't keep doing this. You got to take your opportunity.
This is why the title of the game notes I did for that Blue Jackets game was why tank right? Like, if you're going to lose in regulation. We don't need the loser points.
Correct. Do it correctly.
Even when Igor Shesterkin doesn't drag them in, they still get the point.
Yeah, it's truly wild that they've decided to do this. But JT Miller on IR. There's a couple of threads we can pull at here. Let's talk a little bit about, and Eric, I'm going to give you time because of my internet to pull up the actual quote so we can read the quote. A lot of conversation about this. I took it one way. After the game on Monday, Miller, I think, was talking about how the Rangers were trying to fight their way back into the game. And then the next thing you know, the fans are booing again. I'm not sure what he expects the fans to do, quite frankly. Some people, like the first time I read it on Twitter, I took it as like a shot at the fans. I'm not necessarily sure it was at this point, but I think we are reaching a point of critical mass here where, like, there's just no answers from anyone. And Eric had mentioned this, like, Eric doesn't want to keep hearing about how, JT Miller doesn't have anything to say after games. And now I feel like we've reached that point, Eric. I'm going to let you run with this one.
The quote itself is, quote, "We had a great start, drew a penalty, scored on a penalty. It's funny how the game works sometimes. All of a sudden it's 3-0 and they're booing again." Yeah, they're booing because it's 3-0. They're booing because this team has been a dumpster fire for 2 seasons. I don't know what you want from fans. And I saw somebody suggest that there's a way that you can kind of read that's not him blaming the fans for it. I think is well established at this point. I have really no rope left for JT Miller, so I am not inclined to read any of these things that he is saying post-game in a favorable light. Also, largely because the things he's been saying prior to this haven't been particularly good either. Like this deer in the headlights thing. Well, while I will make the point that if he is on IR because of a concussion, he was giving these post-game comments after having suffered a concussion. I really don't mean this flippantly. So in that sense, I'm willing to extend him a little bit of grace. But pointing out that the fans are booing when it's 3-0, it's like, no fucking shit, dude. What really do you expect from people in that situation?
Why even bring it up? Like, honestly, why even talk about it? Because it does come off as you guys weren't behind us type sense. And listen, I've mentioned this before. I will say it again. The team is so bad that we are probably nitpicking things that in normal circumstance we might not be talking about. I think this would probably get run one way or another, quite frankly, just because of the way that it was worded. But you're the captain of the team. The Rangers are going through a lot of shit. The best player on the team is basically nonchalantly telling you that he's not so sure about his future. Vincent Trocheck is more than likely traded. We're just at the precipice of like this ridiculously critical crossroad for the organization. You've lost yet another game. You blew a magical 4-0 down comeback. Gabe Perreault, 2 goals and an assist. Like, everyone, to your point, Eric, what did you expect? The crowd's not supposed to be booing at 3-0. This year has been a disgrace. Chip, get in here. Do some things. Do some talking.
I read the quote. I didn't see the whole clip. So my question is, was the question that was it a leading question? Was he asked, what did you make of the fan reaction tonight? Or what did you think of the fans tonight? Because that's the only good reason I can think of for him to turn it around like that and say, it's weird, and that's how it played out.
I'll say 2 things.
The fact that his egg was scrambled.
I'll say 2 things. One, I did not see the question, so I do not know the answer to that. But secondarily, I have worked in media for long enough to know that when you get asked a question that you don't want to answer, you answer in some form of, that's a really interesting question, but I think the more interesting question is, and then you talk about whatever you want to talk about. Just because you're asked the question does not mean that you have to answer the question. It doesn't mean you have to accept the frame of the question. It doesn't mean you have to accept the premise of the question. So he could have avoided that even if it was a leading question about the fans booing. But the only sane answer to that, if you are the captain of the team, is we were down 3-0 in a season in which we have won 2, count them, 1, 2 games in regulation at Madison Square Garden the entire year. It is entirely understandable why they are being booed. So it is another example of why I have no patience left for JT Miller. I think it was a mistake to make him captain. He is not the kind of leader that this or any team needs. And I think this is closer to the kind of guy he really is. And it's getting to the point now where Phil always points out who I'm quoting here with this tweet. And I'm just not going to ever remember it because it's more amusing now when I don't remember who it is. But the guy who said that Miller is a great guy to have on your team when things are going well and a terrible guy to have when things aren't going well was absolutely correct. And this is just an example of that because he doesn't know how to handle these kinds of questions. And statements like that just make things worse.
It amplifies an already hot situation, no matter how he meant it. I personally can't imagine he's taking a direct shot at the fans. I think to your point, Eric, the way to answer the question is, look, we thought we were playing well, a call didn't go our way. And then, it just, the momentum turned. You could feel it, from the crowd. They were frustrated. And why wouldn't they be, quite frankly? The lack of personal accountability was something that I was really harping on with Mika Zibanejad last year, where it felt like every time there was a bad loss, he was nowhere to be found. Vincent Trocheck was nowhere to be found. Like, there were a bunch of players that just were kind of out of the limelight in those circumstances. And I think it's funny and ironic that we're talking about this from a Miller perspective, where it's like, why did you even say that? When we're going to talk about the Mike Sullivan piece with Adam Fox, with the milk drinkers and whiskey drinkers, and then some of the other things that he was saying, that leading up to really this podcast, where he came back to New York and people were asking, he keeps talking about how proud he is of the group and how tight they are, and they're going to have these get-togethers. Like, you don't need to say these things. No one is forcing you to say these things. And Adam Fox is sitting on that bench 2 feet from you. He's the best player on your team, and it's not even close. And whether you were a we don't even have to get into the Sullivan piece right now. Let's stick to Miller.
Well, I was going to say, just on the Sullivan thing real quick, the whiskey drinkers and milk drinkers thing was a completely unnecessary comment because it frames it in a way that contrasts players who were on the team with people who were not on the team.
Correct, whether it was meant to or not.
Right, but him talking about how like that group of players is going to walk through history forever together is completely understandable because it is true. And I don't really particularly have a problem with those kinds of comments. Like, what is he supposed to say about a team that won only the 3rd gold medal in the history of men's hockey at the Olympics? Like, those are absolutely true statements. The problem is that it comes after a completely unnecessary
Correct.
foot in your mouth moment. I don't, if you want to suggest that he needs to tiptoe around it a little bit more, okay, I think that that's probably fair to a certain extent. But if he's talking about, the group and what they did, it's going to be impossible for him to avoid that entirely. The mistake was the whiskey and milk drinkers comments. Some of the stuff that he's going to say after that, I think, is just kind of normal stuff that a coach of an Olympic team is probably going to say. And I don't know that Ralph Cox, the guy who's the last guy, although I don't know, did you guys see this too? This one of the other final people cut from the 1980 Olympic team. I think he was maybe the second to last player cut, was named Jack Hughes, which is hilarious.
Yeah, I saw that.
I don't know that any of the comments ever made, again, different comments by Herb Brooks, there's no whiskey milk drinkers, yada, yada, yada. I agree with all of that. The 1980 Olympic team is talked about endlessly I don't know that Ralph Cox took that personally in that kind of a way. Yes, these are different scenarios, but yeah, guys get cut, and you're going to talk about a team that's successful and the players on that team that are successful. And look, like Michael Rusioni and Jim Craig have lived their entire lives off of having won that gold medal. So I can understand if players take umbrage at that, but I don't think that's necessarily the key point. It was the unnecessary previous comment that makes anything he now says just twist the knife a little bit when it comes to Fox.
Sure. Look, they purposefully leaked out that Drury and Sullivan and Quinn fought hard to try to get Fox on the roster, and it was Guerin's decision at the end of the day to leave him off. And that was strategically done to not arrive at this moment, which Sullivan then fucked up completely. And as a guy who has been on the podium after winning a big game and winning big championships before, he should have known better. And he made the comment anyway. And so now it's just everything he says about the Olympic team is just, it's pissing gasoline onto the fire.
Like one more point because Joe brought up Mika. I'll give Mika this much credit last year, which is I don't remember as much him avoiding answering any questions. It was Kreider who avoided answering questions, except for like an interview or two that he gave, the one where he detailed all the injuries he had. Yeah, Panarin also avoided the media. Mika did answer a lot of questions post-game. Mika's problem is that Mika does the kind of thing that drives PR consultants and lawyers insane, which is he answers the question that is asked him, and he answers it honestly, even when that's not the best answer to give. Somebody in a position like what Miller is in right now, and like what especially post-Trouba trade, Mika was in last year, is one of the longest-standing players on the team, and somebody wore a letter on his chest, is you're answering the question not necessarily honestly, completely honestly. Let me put it this way. I have a friend who once wrote a piece who's a political campaign consultant. And the piece said that you're under no obligation to tell the whole truth. You're only under an obligation to tell the version of the truth that is most favorable to you. The point there is you don't lie, but you don't have to highlight negative things that aren't good for you, or in that case of my friend's piece, your candidate. Mika just answers things honestly, and I think that also added fuel to the fire. On one level, I appreciate it from him because he does seem to be kind of an introspective guy, and I think people like that are fairly interesting. But that is a performative role that you are in when you're answering those questions to the media, and completely honest answers aren't always helpful. And I think Miller answered that question honestly, and again, it was not helpful.
What it really, it's funny. I was going to come on here and be complimentary to JT Miller in a bad way, which is the game on Monday. Excuse me, the game against the Flyers, and then the game on Monday. So that was Thursday against the Flyers, and the game on Monday was the best I've seen JT Miller look. And there was a moment where Gabe Perreault got shoved down. I think this was in the Flyers game. On the side of the net. He drove the net, got shoved down. I don't remember who it was in the Flyers, like shoved his face into the ice. And Miller went nuts and threw the gloves off to fight. And the officials got involved before they were able to really like get at each other. And I remember commenting, this is the JT Miller that I've been looking for. This is the guy that we saw a little bit of last year. Hard to judge him off last year because the team was already a wreck. But this was the guy that we wanted to see in October and November. And it's just the guy that we have not seen at all. And it's possible because it's there and you're watching it. I have given Miller a fair amount of passes, and Eric and I have debated this ad nauseum, mainly because I put Miller in a category of should be better next year. He's hurt. He's definitely hurt. He may not be as hurt as we thought. He was definitely keeping himself from being less hurt through, getting up to the Olympics. But the reality of the situation is JT Miller was not playing 100% before, which is not okay. And we've already admitted that that is not the leadership qualities that you want, especially on this team. But he came back and for 2 games actually looked like, at least on the ice, the guy that we wanted to see a little bit more of. And my complaint was going to be, where the fuck was this? And now it's turned into he's on the IR. I don't think we're going to see him for the rest of the year. Again, You may be listening to this podcast, rolling your eyes that we're spending time talking about what may ultimately be a stupid quote. I don't actually think JT Miller went out of his way to insult the fans or to blame the fans. I think it was definitely, to Eric's point, an honest answer of like, yeah, they started booing and it like didn't help. But that's kind of your problem. You've built the situation that you're coming into right now and that the fans are reacting to, quite frankly. So for me, it's worth talking about because the team sucks. Everything is going to be looked at right now. Everything is on the table. There is really no, outside of Gabe Perreault, there is not a single thing that I can point to and be like, you should be super excited about this next year. Noah Lob is very nice. Not necessarily a game breaker, not necessarily a game changer. I'm glad he's there. Matthew Robertson's a great story. Bottom defenseman at best. Scott Morrow can't even get into the fucking lineup. Sent down to Hartford. Maybe we'll have time to talk about that later. So what are you really looking into for next year? It's Perreault. And is it even going to be enough with Perreault? And the answer is no. So yeah, these things matter. These comments matter. And to the point that Eric has been making, you are a leader of men on this hockey team. You were brought in to change the culture. You have not walked the walk, but I do believe that for a period of time, Miller was at least talking the talk. It's hard to answer those questions over and over and over and over again. But now you're not even talking the talk. That shit matters. And it sucks to see pictures and videos of Miller crowd surfing and drinking his fucking face off and celebrating like the team won the first gold medal in 46 years because they had, and then come back to the team and it's kind of business as usual again. So whatever culture Chris Drury thinks he's building.
I was just, look, my big thing with JT Miller is, and I've been a fan of his from the first iteration of JT Miller being here. I never wanted to see him traded, and I am glad they brought him back. I think some people have a better personality for being the captain and standing up in the room, and I think that's where Miller probably excels. Standing up and facing the media is a different thing. And like, I'm not comparing the two in terms of what they mean to the Rangers, but Brian Leetch was a terrible captain in terms of having to talk to the media after games. He was not articulate. He was not, and he had the horrible fortune of having to follow Messier in that role. And so it was a very tough thing for him. And I think JT Miller has never been known as a gregarious guy. He's never been known as an outgoing, fun guy to talk to for the media. And you're seeing that play out here with the Rangers, where, yeah, you'd love to have someone who's a little bit more well-spoken, a little bit more PR savvy, and can give those answers better than JT Miller does. And, look, I just think that we've heard different people who speak to the media from the Rangers who are a lot more eloquent and a lot more thoughtful about their answers than Miller is. Miller just happens to be wearing the C. And so when he speaks like JT Miller has always spoken, it comes off as shit.
It's also, I don't remember who, it might have been Adam Herman, tweeted that the options for the Stephen McDonald Extra Effort Award are Sam Carrick and Mika Zibanejad. I don't even think those are the two options. I think the only option is Sam Carrick, quite literally. As long as he is on this team, he is the only option. And
give it to the fans.
Miller has to be in that conversation if he's actually doing the job that he's here to do. And the fact that he is not in the conversation says all you need to hear about what he's been for this team so far this year. And again, I have been a pretty staunch Miller defender. I remain one in terms of him being better next year. I like the idea of JT Miller a lot more than I've liked JT Miller. And I do think that as much as we talk about a rising tide lifts all boats, a receding tide drops all boats, I guess, right? So it's another thing that we'll talk about if we get tomorrow, which is like, I have such a hard time judging things with this team. I've had such a hard time judging things from last year as well, where I need to start doing the Always Sunny in Philadelphia Charlie like board, where he's looking for whatever the guy's name is, and he has all the strings. Like I, I can I can triangulate the fact that Vincent Trocheck was on the team last year, wasn't really a leader visibly when we needed him to be. There's whispers that he wasn't happy he didn't get to see this year. Now, obviously, more than happy to be traded, you would assume, just from some of the comments. We'll talk about that in a second. I can pinpoint that. Mika Zibanejad, we've basically stopped complaining about because not only is he playing better, but the attitude is there. Like Mika, it's not the sullen, sulky Mika that we got last year. I would like Mika to be off this team this summer, mainly because I think the Rangers just really need to reset entirely. And I do think they could get something back of value for him. But that desire is no longer this, I want him off the team for anything that it was last year. It's a much more respectful, like, you should go your own way because you don't want to be a part of this either type of conversation. And it's unfortunate. It's really unfortunate that we're here and things. It is Tuesday. The trade deadline is 3 days away, and it is as bleak as it could be right.
I think we should talk about Fox, and I can tee that up with a question here. But I'll say one final thing about Miller, which is I'll be as hopeful about this as I possibly can be. JT Miller to be successful on this team, and this rubs against him being the captain, I think, but he needs to be supporting cast. He cannot be lead cast on this team. He is not a star, I think, at this point. I'm still where we were last week, Joe, where I wonder how hurt he really was in the weeks leading up to the Olympics, given that while obviously Charlie's point about him not playing particularly well at the Olympics, I think also that militates in the favor of how I'm thinking about this now, that he wasn't hurt. He's just not good. He needs other players around him who are better and who can help drag him into the fight, because apparently he's not much of a dragger into the fight at this point of his career. And I'll end this, I guess, on a dour note, which is the same thing from last week. The really terrifying prospect is, he was hurt at the beginning of the season, but most of what we've seen from Miller, both in terms of the inconsistency of effort and decline, is just the reality of that player now, which is a terrifying thought. And I hope that that's not the case. But if it is, woof, is this going to get even worse? But speaking of getting even worse, let's start with Nicole Vitale. On a scale of 0 to 10, how concerned are you with Adam Fox's comments? For him to want to revisit with discussions in the summer to see what Drury's plans are for the retool, what exactly do you think he would need to see to commit to staying? Following up on that, I'm going to adjust Nicole's scale from 1 to 10 rather than 0 to 10. So we have the same scale for both of these questions.
It's not going to be fucking 0, so
yeah, none of that matters.
You can leave it.
Statesboro Blueshirt CT, follow up 1 to 10. How concerned are you about losing Fox if the return is sufficient?
All right, let's start with the first piece. Let's get to Statesboro in a second. If you would have asked me this question when the first quote came out, which I think was after the Flyers game on Thursday, I would have told you it was an 8 out of 10. Mainly because it's such an easy question to answer, right? Where if you're not looking to stir up trouble or you're not looking to be too honest, as you said, Eric, it's like, this is where I am. If Fox would have said, I'm a New York Ranger, I'm signed for the next 3 years, and left it at that, that wouldn't be a ringing endorsement, but it wouldn't be a like, holy shit, what the fuck is happening? For him to answer the way that he did, which was basically, and I'm paraphrasing, now's not the time to think about that stuff. I'll think about it at the end of the year. It's a little panic inducing, mainly because Adam Fox is, again, one of the few very good things that's on this team. That 8 turns into a 9.8, maybe even a 9.9, when he is given the opportunity to rectify or at least clarify his comments on Monday And he not only doesn't do that, he doubles down on them. So if he was misinterpreted, if the answer was taken out of context, that was the opportunity for him to turn around and be like, guys, I did not mean it to be like this. This is where I am. This is where I want to be. Or, I didn't mean it to be so alarmist. It's just I'm not thinking about anything like that right now. I'm just trying to, get through this year. Which is kind of what he said, but kind of not. And for a guy who grew up a Rangers fan and forced his way to New York, to not say this is where I want to be is alarming. If I got the opportunity to play for the New York Rangers and I was asked that question and I don't say I want to play for the New York Rangers, something's wrong. And that's where we are. I don't know this is not me overreacting. And if you are rolling your eyes listening to this, and Eric and I talked about this a couple of weeks ago before the comment came out. In fact, I think we talked about it on the last podcast. If you are rolling your eyes and you think we are blowing this one out of proportion, I assure you we are not. We don't talk about the questions beforehand. I don't know how Chip and Eric are going to scale this. I'd be shocked if you guys were not right there with me.
Fair to be shocked. I'm at like a 5. And
Of course, Chip would. You're doing this for attention.
Well, look, you brought me here for eye candy, so
Chris Drury would say it was a 5. By the way, you're not beating the allegations here.
So here's why I'm at a 5. Fox controls his own destiny for until July 1st, 2027. Right? He didn't flip a table. He didn't say, "Get me out of here." He said, "I want to evaluate at the end of the season." And then he was asked 2 days later the same question. And 2 days later, nothing materially had changed. So he gave the same answer. I get it. If, July 1st, 2027, his no movement clause becomes a 16-team no trade clause. If the Rangers are not in a better place, he probably knows he is going to be traded at some point before that contract expires. So if he wants to have any control, if he wants to have the most control of his future possible, it's going to be this coming summer when he can turn around to Drury and say, instead of 16 teams, here are the 10 teams I want to go to. Right? So from a pure business standpoint, it just makes sense for him to say, I'm going to, we'll circle back at the end of the season, see where things stand and go from there. I'm fine with that. And in terms of the doubling down on it, like I said, his answer didn't change because nothing had changed.
But then you sound confident that he's thinking about not being a New York Ranger.
Sure.
So that's how I'm taking Nicole's question. But
I'm not panicked about it.
Oh, but that's the Statesboro's question, I think.
Okay. No, so Nicole's question is, on a scale of 1 to 10, how concerned are you with Fox's comments?
I'm not concerned. To me, it's a 5. It's just his comments are, yes, I would love for him to be a Ranger for life, and I would love for him to have given that answer. And I'm not concerned about his comments because from a business standpoint, they totally make sense for him to make those comments. It didn't make sense for him in that moment to plant his flag one way or the other. Because if he says, I'm here for the duration, whatever that is, and then on July 1st you hear Adam Fox wants to be traded, well, then from a PR standpoint from Fox, he's screwed himself up.
Can I reframe the question for Joe? Because actually, I'm tracking with what you're saying, Chip. But for Joe, how, on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being not happening and 10 being an absolute metaphysical certainty, do you think it is that Fox will be traded away from the Rangers?
I would say at this point it's probably a 7. I would think. I would say more likely than not likely by a fair margin that he's traded.
Okay.
I think not by the trade deadline, to be fair. I think
sure.
The reason I'm answering Nicole's question the way, and maybe I took it the wrong way, you should be really fucking concerned in a best case situation about Adam Fox leaving from a timeline perspective, right? So there's a ripple effect with that. If Fox leaves, is Gavrikov going to ask out? Is Igor Shesterkin going to ask out? Now, the Statesboro question, which I think is really important, is how concerned are you, right, if the Rangers get back the return that they need to? And that answer is if you trust, let's say Chris Drury gets the return that you would expect for a player like Adam Fox. In the grand scheme of things, emotion aside, rip my heart out. The best thing for the organization is for Adam Fox to be traded. And I am not an Adam Fox hater. I have been a longstanding Adam Fox defender. I think all of you people who want Adam Fox traded because you think that the NHL is played like it was in the 1980s are in for fucking rude awakening. But I don't think you have the capacity to even understand what that's going to look like when it's happening to you. The people who are like, good, get him out of here. He's too soft. He's not a good skater. He can't do. I don't know what more the man needs to show you that he is one of the best defensemen in the NHL, bar none. And the fact that Bill Guerin thought that he wasn't one of the best 7 defensemen in the United States, it's not an indictment on anything. But in terms of the Rangers' contention window, in terms of what they desperately need, which is high-end talent, youth, and a fucking prospect pool that is well stocked, you do not have a better trade chip than Adam Fox. So to answer your question, Eric, I think it is more likely than not that Adam Fox is traded before his contract is over. And to answer Statesboro's question, I think it is in the best interest of the organization to have that be the outcome. I think you can have the same exact conversation with Igor Shesterkin, quite frankly. But the caveat there is, if you think this is a retool with Adam Fox traded, you are talking about missing the playoffs for 3 or 4 years at best, I think, if Adam Fox is traded, even if you get the best return back.
Yeah, this was going to be my next question, which is maybe this is a question that we should be revisiting on a weekly or every other week basis. And even amongst the banter staff, there have been some disagreements on this. I mean, Phil has been from day one saying it is not a retool, it's a rebuild. And I think that there's some credit to that argument that retool suggests obviously a shorter timeline. And I just do not see the path to the shorter timeline. Like we were talking about this the other day, that, whether or not they see themselves with the possibility, this was having to do with whether or not they trade Vincent Trocheck, of being a playoff team next year, which I think is ludicrous. Like I cannot understand why you send out the letter if you think that there was at all a remote possibility that you're going to be a playoff team next year or the year after that. So as somebody who has always been of the mind, and the problem is right, these two terms do not have solid definitions. There is not something where you can look up and go, retool means this number of years and rebuild means exactly this number of years. I mean, I'm actually going to pull it up here real quick because it is just absolutely devastating and horrifying. The list of players, speaking of a team that has been rebuilding for way too long, some players who got traded at the deadline in the last season, the Buffalo Sabres made the playoffs. Jason Arnott, Dustin Penner, Sergei Samsonov, Frederick Modin, Radoslav Klesla, Brian McCabe, Corey Stillman, Alex Kovalev, Brent Sopel, and Jarkko Ruutu. Okay. So even in the world of like rebuilding, there's no clear definition on timeline there. It's just obviously longer than retool. I have always thought that this was going to be probably a longer process than the Rangers were letting on. And I'm not even certain that they don't realize that themselves. I don't know how much of that is PR gloss, lipstick being put on the very ugly pig of this franchise at the moment, trying to keep season ticket holders buying season tickets and keep people coming to the games. Especially considering, as you have said, they don't really have a whole lot else to sell at the moment. It's not like, like Sharks last year, right? Yeah, we're dog shit, but come see Macklin Celebrini, right? There's nothing that they have to pitch like that. So to answer Nicole's question finally here, if Chip, you're at a 5 and Joe, you're at a 9, I guess I'm going to come in between the two of you at a 7. I'm probably more alarmed about this than Chip is, because I think it definitely it forecloses any opportunity for this to be a timeline similar to the last letter. Because you're going to get back futures for Adam Fox when you do, and you should get back futures for him. And it's going to take time for that to actually build into something. So I think you're foreclosing on we'll be out of the playoffs for a couple of seasons, and you're moving more into, as Joe, you were saying, 4 to 5. Honestly, that may be better for this franchise. It really may be better for this franchise to fully go through that process, even if they are, at least in a PR perspective, denying to themselves that they are going to do it now. But I am higher than you are, Chip, because I think it's bad. I'm not as alarmed as Joe because of the second part and what Joe just highlighted himself, which is he is the player who can bring back the greatest haul of futures that puts this team in a position to grow into something sooner rather than later. So I think there was a case for trading Adam Fox, irrespective of all of this Team USA spurred drama, because he is the piece that you have that can bring back the greatest return, because he's on a really reasonable contract for a couple more years, and he is one of the best defensemen in the National Hockey League, and he is going to be coveted as a result. So the part of me that is probably higher than Chip is I think it does say something very bad about the state of the franchise and the culture of the team, which we can get more into if we really want to. It's not good, but it is not catastrophic in the sense of, if not for a dissatisfied kind of to a point that Joe was making about the Scott Morrow situation over text. If the Rangers are in a playoff position right now, and you're getting these kinds of comments from Adam Fox because he really is that upset about the Olympic stuff, then I am with you at a 9 or a 9.5. But this isn't setting the team back any more, really, than I think they're probably already set back. So I just cannot quite rise to that level of panic.
Yeah, and to clarify, it's the way I took the question was, how panicked are you that Adam Fox is leaving?
Yeah, the question is, on a scale of 1 to 10, how concerned are you with Fox's comments?
Yeah, again, I took it as like that
But
I
even
agree
still,
with.
how concerned are you that he's leaving? I can't be at a 9 that I'm concerned that he's leaving. I think it sucks, but this is rats fleeing off a sinking ship at this point in time. It's not like if they could only hold on to Adam Fox, they're going to be back in the playoffs and they're going to be a serious contender next year. That's a couple years away anyway.
So here's the next question, though. If that's your response, and I agree with you, do you trust Chris Drury to get the best return to Adam Fox right now?
Well, what I would say is, if I were Chris Drury, which I'm not saying I am, I would tell Adam Fox, if he comes to me this summer and says, I want to be traded, fine. Give me 16 teams. That's what your no movement clause converts into next year. It converts into a 16-team no trade clause. Give me 16 teams you want to go to, you don't want to go to, and I will work something out with the teams you do. But if he comes to me and says, I want to go to, I want to go to the Dallas Stars, and that's the only team I want to accept a trade to, no, I'm not trading you until your no movement clause converts.
Right. Now, so this actually is a good transition, if you're okay with me transitioning this over to Trocheck, Eric.
Go for it.
Which is, things are starting to reach the media that the Rangers' asking price for Trocheck is way too high. There's comments that it's a buyer's market. There's plenty of people out there right now that, teams have a lot of different options. It does appear that Robert Thomas is imminently headed to Buffalo. And I think that's a really good thing for the Rangers because it removes the other really big piece off the board. But as I tweeted when Vince tweeted that out, it's kind of the normal progression. I'd be much more concerned if I wasn't hearing those things. That more than likely is a smokescreen from the purchasing teams. that are going out there saying, oh, the Rangers prices for Trocheck are way too high. Nobody's interested. Like Elliot Friedman, like, trust me, I've talked to a ton of teams. Nobody like, that's fine. But here's where things get interesting. I've been a pretty firm, if Vincent Trocheck is not traded at this deadline, I'm out on Chris Drury guy. I've been eating crow on a lot of things. So I'll revise that here for a second. If Chris Drury reads the market, doesn't love what he gets and what is available, he is under no obligation to trade Vincent Trocheck right now.
Yeah,
he can
agreed.
absolutely wait until the summer and see. Now, where this rolls back into what Eric and Chip were talking about with Fox, Vincent Trocheck is answering direct questions about being traded from the media. Talked about his no-trade list, including a lot of teams out west, wants to stay on the East Coast, priorities are winning a Stanley Cup. Not that he has any say. If the team is not on his no-trade list, Vincent Trocheck has no say. And I think we've all been very clear that it would be absolutely asinine for Chris Drury to give Vincent Trocheck so much as a lick of thought in this. You could be nice to Panarin. You could be nice to Carson Soucy. Got to get the best return you possibly can for Vincent Trocheck. But if Chris Drury does that, which I think would be undoubtedly the smartest thing, assuming Charlie Stramel and a 2027 first is the best offer on the table, and Drury's like, fuck this, I'm not taking that offer. I'm going to wait to the summer when there's more suitors. Vincent Trocheck is still signed to term. You're still not getting a rental. It creates a really awkward circumstance where Vincent Trocheck is pretty much under the impression that he is being traded. It could poison the locker room even further. Does that make things even worse? Yeah, in the sense that, like, we saw what happened to the locker room when Jacob Trouba was basically completely out on the Rangers. I do think Vincent Trocheck is on his best behavior right now because he's looking for teams to actually be interested in him. There is no telling what he would do over the course of 2 months of being.
You wouldn't think that he would think that if that were the story that got out, that would also still damage his opportunities to be traded to other teams. I think the same rule still applies there.
I do, but I think he'd be I assume he would be more emotional about it because I would be pretty pissed off about it, to be honest with you. So
I think that if this was Trocheck's first team, I think I'd agree with you. But Trocheck's been moved before, and I don't know that I'm there with you on that.
Well, go ahead. I'm opening this up to you. So I guess the question that I was throwing out there was, and you've kind of answered it, and I would answer it this way as well, which is whatever comes. You can't fuck up the Vincent Trocheck trade.
Right. My thing is, I don't think you're going to get a better offer for him over the summer, because the team that's acquiring him now is looking at having him for 4 playoff runs instead of for 3. So if you're only getting him for 3 playoff runs, are you going to get less than, like, is Stramel in a first better than just a first? Yeah. I mean, so
I think the difference between the 4 and 3 playoff runs is probably more or less negated by having more potential suitors, because it is the summer and more teams can talk themselves into, we are going to be serious contenders and we're going to have him for the entire year in 3 years and 3 playoff runs, and adding more suitors to it potentially ups the return, or at least at a minimum keeps it no worse than it was before.
And his protection drops.
His protection eventually drop. Yes.
Can I provide the case against that, though?
Sure.
On the flip side, which is, I agree with what you're saying, Eric. Does Trocheck still have a 16-team no-trade list next year? Or does it?
I think it drops to 12.
Say it drops to 12. Knowing that this is the plan now, because I don't think Trocheck was thinking about this when he gave his no-trade protection list in July of last year. He could very easily go with his agent and say, all right, as currently constructed, this team can't afford me. Don't put them on the list. This team can't afford me. Don't put them on the list. This team doesn't need me. Don't put them on the list. And then use his 12 slots to do what Chip is basically saying he was not going to let Adam Fox do, which I agree with, which is you got to be able to trade Trocheck to a variety of teams to start a bidding war. So giving Trocheck the opportunity to pull Jacob Trouba where he was basically going down the list of figuring out who can't trade for him and leaving them off the list. You don't want to give him that opportunity either.
Fair enough. What to correct one thing here. He currently has a 12-team no trade list. Beginning next year, it is a 10-team no trade list. So your point is well taken, but if you're only eliminating 10 teams from there, you still have a lot of other potential teams. Yes, so maybe it does drive down the price because of who you've eliminated in that list of 10. But there's even an argument depending on, again, we don't know what that 12-team list looks like. We don't know what the two teams are that would potentially be different, or maybe they're all different. I don't know that it makes that big of a difference.
It's just a risk.
I just don't know that it does. But all of this is risk, right?
Sure.
All of this is risk. So the big thing that I have against, and this is not necessarily a reason to say that they need to trade Vincent Trocheck, is what I'm going to find to be the frustrating part of that is, and I want to be clear to those of you listening, I have never been less inclined, to the point of the question that Joe asked earlier, to give Chris Drury the benefit of the doubt than I am right now. The problem is, if Drury does not trade Trocheck because he does read the market and says, this is not enough for this player, I can get more for him in the summer, it is going to be intolerable between now and then, because it's just going to be evidence of how Drury fucked it up again, even if in this case he does happen to be right. Now, he will have to move Trocheck eventually, and we will see then. But you're always going to end up in some way comparing it to an unknown, which is going to be the frustrating part of this. I think for the purpose of evaluation, we got to lock in the Stramel and a first as the floor. And if whatever he ends up getting traded for is equal to or lesser than that, if it's possible, then that's a disaster. But if it's more than Stramel and a first, then I think you have to say that was probably the best deal that was available. So the problem is going to be, we are going to be left on the other side then of this trade deadline with still very little information on which to do any evaluation of Chris Drury. Now, plenty of people have done their evaluation, have already determined that he's the worst general manager in the history of the National Hockey League, which, again, maybe I'm creeping closer to, but I'm still quite a distance away from at this point. I mean, this is still a place where Peter Chiarelli exists, so I'm not quite there yet. But we're not going to really have any new data on which to do this kind of evaluation other than some minor moves, which is just not going to be sufficient. And we're once again kicking the can down the road on real evaluation, real serious evaluation of the guy who's going to be doing this retool or rebuild for the Rangers, and perhaps trading Adam Fox and Igor Shesterkin at some point in the future too. So it's not going to be fun for any of us if that's the case. But it may still be the right thing to do if all that is on the table really is Stramel and a first or other things equivalent to that.
I would be shocked, by the way, if Trocheck was not traded on Friday or by Friday.
And by the way, I don't want to hear any shit about this being a buyer's market when Michael McCarron gets a second round pick.
Yeah. That's what I mean when it's this information. You want to be hearing things like that in the media if you're the New York Rangers, because it means other teams are going to the media to try to get this information out there to force you to drop your price. So,
and by the way, if Michael McCarron is the second round pick, not only should Trocheck be traded, but Sam Carrick can't be a Ranger.
Well, and this is the other thing, Chip. You don't release the letter to trade Soucy and Panarin. You just don't, because you knew those things were happening regardless. You release the letter because you're trading Schneider and Trocheck and, potentially Carrick, Brodzinski, whatever it is.
But if the offers aren't there, you're not trading Trocheck and Schneider simply because you sent out the letter.
Correct. Agreed. It's just...
You're trading him because you sent out the letter, but you may not be doing it at this trade deadline.
Correct. At this juncture.
Exactly.
Yes. Right. So, I think Eric and I have been as far from our Chris Drury defending days as possible. I am looking at a situation right now that's playing out how I would hope it would be playing out, which is other teams are like trying to get Drury to drop his price. He's very clearly not doing it. He shouldn't. And the thought process is that somebody's going to pay, you would think,
and
by
and
Friday.
also, I've seen it on. I think we talked about it. We've seen it on Twitter where it's now leaking that the offer, which I think was reported as Strammel, Carson Lambos, and a first round pick. People are saying, yeah, Bill Guerin made his first and final offer on Trocheck, and that's sitting on the table for the Rangers, and he hasn't been one. That's Guerin trying to, through the media, get Drury to move off of your offer, Wellstat, or
Correct.
someone bigger than that.
You're not getting another one. That's
and
no.
Right, and if Drury was okay with that, I think that's part of the reason why Drury has kept playing Trocheck, is because if Drury was okay with that, he'd have taken that trade. And he's playing Trocheck and saying, I don't have to trade this guy.
Yeah, and
I certainly don't have to trade him for that.
The leverage that he has with Vincent Trocheck is the leverage he did not have with Artemi Panarin, which is time. And yeah, there was more time where Drury could have been like, you know what, Kings, I'm not taking this offer. I'm going to run this to the trade deadline. That's not what I mean. I mean, Chris Drury can legitimately not trade Vincent Trocheck at the trade deadline. And yes, I think we all outlined the fact that I don't think the offer goes up. I don't necessarily know if there's, more value that way. There's some risks associated with, Trocheck having more defined ideas of what the plan looks like and whatever. But it does at least put the Rangers in a situation where he can say to Bill Guerin, I'm not trading him. You can't really play that game with Panarin because you had to trade Panarin at the deadline. He was an unrestricted free agent at the end of the year. So I think I'm hearing the things I want to hear. I am firmly putting Chris Drury in I need to be proven wrong or right territory, that I need to be proven wrong, because there's not really a lot to work with right now that leads me to believe that things are going to be okay. And it's part of the reason why I have concerns about this Adam Fox situation. Like this can get really bleak really fast, because if Adam Fox is traded, I don't know why any other veteran really wants to be here. Now, to the point that we were making before, that's the best thing for the organization in general, more than likely, is to say, hey, here's the contention timeline, here's the window. Vlad Gavrikov, you don't want to be here. You didn't sign up for this. Cool. Totally get it. Let's get something. You know what I mean? Like, it's fine. It resets the Rangers in a better way than they're going to be done right now. But you are talking about a pretty long tail. The Rangers are not making the playoffs for a long time. And, not necessarily anything anyone wants. Now, let's flip gears to Scott Morrow, sent down today by head coach Mike Sullivan. I have issues with this for a couple of reasons, and neither of those reasons are because Scott Morrow's been anything particularly special. So that in and of itself tells you kind of what you need to know about it. I don't understand how in a lost season, Mike Sullivan does not have more patience for Morrow. I understand the concerns. I'll also give Sullivan the benefit of the doubt that he's saying the right things when it comes to prospect development and young player development. And it's entirely possible that he said to Scott Morrow, and he would not be wrong if he said this, hey, your defensive work needs work, or it just fucking outright sucks, and you need to go work on your game. You're not ready to work on it in the NHL. Work on it in Hartford. We'll talk later, right? Totally fine. But where this sort of concerns me, and I think we're all on the same page here, is Morrow was a pretty big piece of the K'Andre Miller trade. You could even say the centerpiece of the K'Andre Miller trade. Would not be the first time Chris Drury brings somebody in a trade where they're just not that guy. And this is another, like, if that is the case right now, and I'm assuming it kind of has to be, Mike Sullivan answered a question, I think, before the Flyers game about how him and Drury are in lockstep with the lineup and they talk all the time. So Drury, less than a year removed from making this trade, is okay with Morrow not being capable of playing in NHL hockey games?
Yeah. I think that's where you have to return to the point you were making before, which is, I think it is fairly obvious that Morrow right now is a one-dimensional player. He is an offensive defenseman whose only means of providing defense is possessing the puck so that the other team doesn't have it and cannot attempt to score. That defensive part of his game needs to improve because the odds that the offensive dimension of his game is going to improve to an elite level, as we were talking about this earlier over text, there aren't a lot of one-dimensional offensive defensemen in the National Hockey League. There's Erik Karlsson. Who else did we come up with? John Klingberg and Tony DeAngelo. Other guys, the latter two, who have had difficulty finding regular work in the National Hockey League. So one of two things needs to happen with Morrow. Either he needs to become the second coming of Erik Karlsson, not going to happen, or he needs to improve on the defensive side of his play. I think it's completely reasonable to think that the Rangers knew that is who this player was when they acquired him from Carolina, that he needed work on the defensive side. I think we even heard that reporting at the time, that this is a guy who needs work on the defensive side of the puck, but he's a good puck carrier, puck mover, offensive player as a defenseman. I think it's completely reasonable also to think that on a team that is having the experience it's having this season, maybe asking him to develop his defensive game against Austin Matthews or Connor McDavid or the elite players of the National Hockey League isn't the best way for him to develop that. That maybe the best way for him to develop it is to develop it in the developmental league against lesser players so that he can build the fundamentals of that side of his game. And because he's young enough and because of what we just discussed in terms of timeline, have him as a part of the team next year, having gotten some of that experience under his belt against a little bit easier competition that he is eventually going to face, rather than doing this. And we've talked about this with prospects before, the throwing them in the deep end of the pool and just hoping that they swim. So I think the bigger concern is probably just that Scott Morrow is what Scott Morrow is, and he is a one-dimensional offensive defenseman, but not quite good enough offensively to justify his existence in the NHL. I would probably be interested in taking a long-term bet that he ends up largely as a career AHLer. Now, that is an indictment of Chris Drury, undeniably, that the player that they got back in the Keandre Miller trade is somebody who is not going to make a serious impact at the NHL level. I'm happy to accept the consequence of that. But if you hope for him to become something more than that, I just don't see that big of a problem with this move, rather than throwing him to the figurative or, if it were earlier in the season, the literal San Jose Sharks to try to figure out his game that way.
Yeah, I mean, I'm with both of you on this. I think that I think it's a bad look that he's being sent down right now. I don't think it's a bad thing that he's being sent down right now. Where I have a bigger problem is, and this also gets to the appearance piece and the optics of it, which is the Rangers refused to play Braden Schneider on his left side over Urho Vakanainen, so that they could, to Joe's point, have a long look at Morrow on the right side. But they moved Schneider to the left side to get Vinny Iorio in there, who was not the centerpiece of a trade. He was a waiver pickup coming to the Rangers on his third team. And yeah, that's not a great look for Chris Drury, that the team, Occam's razor says they did that because they had more desire to get Iorio in the lineup than they did Morrow. And it's not a good look for the Rangers that Chris Drury's biggest asset last year was Keandre Miller, traded for Morrow. For Morrow and a pick. And the team values a waiver wire pickup more than the centerpiece of that Keandre Miller trade. So yes, it's good that they're acknowledging that Morrow has things to work on and they're going to work with him in the developmental league. No, it's not a good look that a team that has had problems bringing young players along seems to have already made fucked up the trade of Keandre Miller and brought in this player who, to your point, Eric, may be just an AHL tweener.
I also add one more caveat that depending on how things turn out between now and the trade deadline on Friday, there's a possibility that he's back next week. Like they could be moving players off of their blue line and need him back on the team. So maybe this is to allow him to get, while they still have their full complement in the NHL right now, some AHL games under his belt. There's a couple games coming up this weekend. So maybe that's the case. I don't know, but I've said what I've said on this.
Yeah, I think if I to the irksome part of this for me with Sullivan is there was never a period of time where Gavrikov should have been quarterback in the power play. It's just not. The season is lost. There is absolutely no reason you should not try to. If the only thing he's good at is the offensive part of his game, and you want him to work on the defensive side of his game, at least give him the opportunities to get better on both sides of the puck. I do not understand it, and it's a little jarring for me from an egg on your face perspective with that we were talking about with Drury, where this is what Mike Sullivan is really good at. Mike Sullivan churns out quality defensemen. Matthew Robertson's a really good example of this. Not to suggest that Robertson was nothing before Sullivan got here, but he's constantly through Pittsburgh. He was finding no-name guys that were really doing a good job defensively. And for him to see nothing in Morrow, which is kind of the sense that I'm getting, like Lorio, okay. I thought he looked terrible in the Flyers game. Apparently he looked fine. Vakanainen, like there's just no reason for me. Look, again, if this was going to happen, I'm glad Matthew Robertson seems to be a staple in the lineup. Lorio is not an older player. He's 23 years old himself. So there's some glimmers of youth here. But again, this season's over. It doesn't matter. And in fact, losing is the best thing for you.
Lorio was picked 15 picks behind Morrow.
There you go.
By the way, Cole Smith, who is a veteran fourth line player for Nashville, was just traded to Vegas for a third round pick. He's a 30-year-old UFA at the end of the season. Taylor Radish should also be moved.
Yeah, seller's market. It is a seller's market. Yeah, despite the bullshit you may have been hearing, it is a seller's market.
It's exactly what you want to hear.
Should we lightning round through the remainder of these questions?
Yeah, let's lightning round the questions.
All right. From Last a Lifetime, do the Rangers have any sports psychologists on their payroll? My guess is no, and wouldn't it be wise to go down this road when looking at potential draft picks? It's not like this team doesn't have the money.
I'd be shocked if they did not have one, to be honest with you. I would assume every professional team has one. It's just a matter of how much investment they actually make in the program.
Yeah, I think that's probably right. I don't know how much investment they actually make. I tend to get the feeling that maybe they don't emphasize it all that much, given what we've seen, but I don't know. I just don't know. Question from some guy named Chip. Do the Rangers need to make a change in the broadcast booth? I'm watching the game now. This was a day ago. And Maloney is just getting worse and worse as the season progresses. Kenny is carrying him like Fox carried Lindgren. Yeah, I've said this before, and I think there is something about Maloney that works fine for radio and does not work well at all for television. I'm going to be annoyed if next year it is the same broadcast pairing. It probably will be, but I have, unlike the argument that broke out beneath this, don't really have a particular problem with Kenny Albert. I think Kenny Albert is good. I think that if Faust is more your speed, that's fine. In matters of taste, there are no disagreements, but I don't particularly enjoy Maloney and just think he works better as a radio guy and probably should go back.
Yeah, I was waiting for Chip to answer the question, but he asked the question. I think there's always going to be a feeling of what we lost when you go from Sam and Joe to not Sam and Joe. there are times when I really like Maloney, mainly because he's saying the things that I'm thinking. But what made Maloney great on radio was like the NR17 version of Maloney. And what you're getting on TV is the PG-13 version of him. So you don't even get the best qualities of his anger. And that kind of takes things down. I like Maloney a lot. This is not an insult to him. It is a very difficult thing to do. I know. I do it for the Sacred Heart men's lacrosse team. I'm sure there are people that listen to that and they think I'm terrible. Like I get it. It's as a group of people that podcast weekly, it's not easy to throw yourself out there. And there are plenty of people who don't like what we do, and yet they still listen. So, like, I understand. This is not meant to be like an aggressive criticism against Maloney. Just, I understand how people are coming to the conclusion themselves. To Eric's point, no one's wrong in the matter of taste. That it's just not for them. I don't think it's a disaster. It's definitely a steep drop off from where we were.
The one thing I will say is you do this part-time for fun, and Maloney does it for a living and is in, his 70s? So even Joe, there's the potential that if you were to do color commentary more often and more frequently, that you would continue to develop. I don't think Maloney's changing at all. Like, this is who he is. And again, I want to be clear. I think it works fine on radio. Radio is a different medium than television is, obviously. And the kind of broadcasting that you do on it. I mean, there's a reason why you don't just put the television broadcast on the radio or have the radio broadcast be the television narration too. It's a different style of broadcasting when you can see it and when you can't see it. And I understand people. I'm not a huge fan of Maloney's thing on television, but I'm perfectly fine with it on radio. So I would like it to go back to where I think he's at his best. That's my take.
Chip, do you want to answer your own question?
I do. To Eric, I agree with Eric. Like, John Sterling was great on radio because John Sterling called Yankee games. Joe, the Yankees play baseball, which is another sport in America.
I know. I actually know who John Sterling is.
Oh, just checking. And the comment about John Sterling was always John Sterling would paint a picture of what was going on in his mind, not necessarily what was going on the field, which is why it worked out really well that he was on radio and you couldn't actually see the game that Sterling was calling. Maloney is, I think, very good on radio for the reasons why you said, which were, he was a lot more forthright in his criticisms, and you weren't necessarily watching the game. You were relying on Maloney to paint a picture of what was going on. And I just don't think that's working as well for him on TV. I'd like to see Brian Boyle.
Yeah, I think Brian Boyle has done a very good job, actually. I like Boyle as well, and I think that would be perfectly fine. Nicole Vitale, with Igor and Fox back, what are the odds the Rangers win enough games to slip out of the bottom five, a.k.a. the top five in drafting, or I'll add at least the odds in the lottery? Remember, they still have to play the Devils 3 times. Should they manage to win them all, highly unlikely. Like last year with the Isles, they could really screw this one up.
Hate how good Schaefer is.
I do hate how good.
My God,
my brother made this point over the weekend. So my son's league semifinal hockey game was on Saturday. And made to the point that Matthew Schaefer is 6 years older than my son is, which just seems absolutely insane. I hate how good he is. But anyway.
It would bother me way more if the Rangers were good, because they're not. I don't have to worry about it for a few years, and it'll just be something that we'll deal with for, a decade or so, I guess. But time is a flat circle. Eat at Arby's. Like, what? I don't even know how to answer this question. Yeah. And that's not a shot at you, Nicole. It's the right question. The funniest outcome for the Rangers is they have this disaster of a season. They actually do get into the pole position or as close as possible to win the lottery. move down to like the 4th pick or something, and they miss out on all like the quote unquote can't miss guys. Or I guess the funniest outcome is they win the lottery and they pick McKenna and he ends up not being anything. So yeah.
I don't think we should do the full thing with this, but why don't, for fun, we just do a little Mike and the Mad Dog here real quick, next couple of weeks. So Thursday, Toronto, win or loss?
Loss.
Saturday, the Devils.
Loss.
March 9th, Philly.
Loss.
Tuesday, the 10th, Calgary.
Win.
Thursday, the 12th, Winnipeg.
Win.
Loss.
14th, Minnesota.
Loss. Vincent Trocheck revenge game. He scores a hat trick.
16th, LA Kings.
Loss. Panarin's putting up fucking 43 points in that game.
Yes, he is. Panarin's going to have at least a hat trick.
18th, the Devils.
Loss.
And 19th, the Blue Jackets, which I think we can say is a loss because they cannot beat the Blue Jackets. So I to answer Nicole's question, I think they're going to have a very hard time. I put this in my game notes from the Columbus game. They're going to have a very hard time catching, quote unquote, Vancouver. Vancouver is very bad. They are right there in the hunt with St. Louis, Calgary, Chicago, Winnipeg.
St. Louis, who might be trading Binnington too. So
Binnington too, but that actually might be better for them. Like if they played only Joel Hofer, Jordan Binnington has been just about the worst goaltender in the National Hockey League this year. Now the Blues are no great shakes, obviously, but I think Hofer at this point is a better run in net for them. So that may actually make them a better team if they were more regularly playing Hofer. So they should stay right in that top 5. You just really got to hope that they luck out and get in the top 2 or 3.
I mean, I put together what could possibly be the Rangers lineup on Saturday with some trades and with JT Miller out.
Thursday, because you're skipping over this Toronto game, which I think you're forfeiting.
Well, no, I'm talking about post-trade deadline.
All post-trade deadline? Okay.
Yeah. You got Lafreniere, Zibanejad, Perreault as your first line. Cooley, Laba, Brendan Brisson as your second line. Ty Cartier, Juuso Parssinen, and Connor Sheary on your third line. And Adam Enstrom, Brian Brodzinski, and Brett Berard as your fourth line.
Chip put this on Facebook, by the way. You should be following us on Facebook.
I did put it on Facebook. I did. Per your instructions, Jeff. So I don't care how good Fox and Igor are. If those are your 16 forwards, 12 forwards, can't add anymore. Those are your 12 forwards. You're not winning many hockey games.
I think that's right. Nicole Vitelli also asked if Trocheck to the Wild for Stramel in a first and another mediocre prospect is the best offer Drury gets across the league. Do you think Drury should bite or wait till summer? We've already answered this question, so Nicole will see that from earlier in the show. Ye old scribe. I heard how
Ye old scribe is the one that makes the crazy scales. So
that's what we got here, Joe.
Yep, here we go.
I heard how much Joe and Eric missed my scales on last week's podcast, so I knew I had to come back with one for this week, and I think you'll both like this one. On a scale of 1, not nervous at all, to Tom Wilson about to fight a no-name Frenchman, how nervous should Ranger fans be about this trade deadline?
I don't know how to answer that question. How nervous should you be? You should be Tom Wilson about to face the Frenchman. Now, mainly because if you think things are bleak now, we'll wait until what happens if Drury fucks this up. Now, that is not an indictment on Drury himself, although I think there's reasons to be concerned. But, like, you are at a pretty critical turning point here for the organization as a whole. And we may look back on this moment as 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 years from now as, hey, that was kind of the start of the dark. Like everybody pinpoints
the second dark ages,
right? The Bobby Holik signing of, hey, that's where things were kind of crazy. Like that. That's where we're at right now. So you should definitely be Tom Wilson as a Frenchman comes barreling toward him.
Max Kondratiev for Brian Leach,
which happened on this day in 2004.
No, why
which
even invoke that?
I didn't
On
even
Leach's birthday.
realize. Yes, that was Leach's birthday.
Yeah, that I
they
knew.
traded him.
And I think he left a voicemail, didn't he? Or like he called Messier, he answered the phone or something in the room, and he was like, "Yo, I got to talk to Brian because I traded him."
Oh,
Yeah,
brutal,
bad.
brutal.
Second time Brian Leach was traded, by the way.
I'm
Well-known
also,
fact.
yes. I'm also
Mike Richter was also traded.
Mike Richter was also traded to
That's
San
correct.
Jose, I believe, if I'm not mistaken.
I thought it was. Wasn't it Vancouver?
I think Leach was traded to San Jose.
Well, Charlie's going to get this in the next Unbuzzed
Charlie will
Reports.
correct us.
Charlie will get it.
Charlie.
I'm also going to say, yeah, I'm maybe a shade short of Tom Wilson about to fight a no-name Frenchman in terms of how I feel about this trade deadline. I'm not max nervous, but that is a fantastic scale.
It's the best scale you've ever made.
That's a great scale.
The
I
best
love that.
scale.
Excellent work, Yield Scribe. Rangers fan born after 1994. If we trade Fox, how far do you think it pushes our rebuild back? And with his age, do you think it would be best to trade him because we may not be good again until he's at least 30? We've already answered the second part of that. I think we really answered the beginning part of it too, that trading Fox does extend this truly from a retool into a rebuild.
But doesn't
but
push
that may
it
be
back
for the
like
best.
I
don't think I agree with you. I don't think it
extends
really
the
affects
timeline. But it's better for the rebuild, if that makes sense.
Yeah, because of what you'll get back in return. Also from Rangers fan born after 1994, what are some of your hottest predictions for this trade deadline for the Rangers and for the NHL?
Sorry, read that again.
What are some of your hottest predictions for this trade deadline for the Rangers and for the NHL?
For the NHL, I would say some GM is going to do something stupid.
Well, that always happens.
The Buffalo Sabres will make the playoffs is the one for the NHL. My hot take for the Rangers is Vincent Trocheck is not traded to the Minnesota Wild. And I have a sneaking suspicion Braden Schneider is traded by Friday.
My hot take is this trade deadline actually ends Connor McDavid's relationship in Edmonton. If they do not go out and get a goaltender, like they somehow traded Stuart Skinner and got worse in goal, and they have said they're not interested in getting a goalie. They're looking for more forwards. If I'm Connor McDavid, I am so done with the Edmonton Oilers.
Yeah, that contract has to feel so stupid for him right now.
Yes.
I don't know why you didn't want the distraction. It ended up being a distraction anyway. Just leave yourself the freedom to make a decision.
Yeah, he got goalied out of a gold medal, and he's gonna get and he got goalied out of 2 Stanley Cups, and
always the bridesmaid.
He and Draisaitl need to get their bridesmaids dresses out of dry cleaning.
Well, the rumor of perhaps going after Jordan Binnington, and like, okay, so you'd be acquiring a guy who, won you the 4 Nations and also has won a Stanley Cup, but you're acquiring him at the point when he is the worst statistical goaltender in the National Hockey League, would be the most Edmonton Oilers move of all time. For all that we talked about Team USA living in the past of that, Herb Brooks, I'm not looking for the best players, I'm looking for the right ones. The Edmonton Oilers being like, yeah, you know what, we've got Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl, and we've got Zach Hyman and all of these great forwards, and we're going to go after more forwards, does kind of ignore the fact that, 1, of course, the 80s were different. 2, you had Grant Fuhr back there in the 1980s. Like, you had one of the best goaltenders of all time back there. A guy who started, I think it was every single game for the St. Louis Blues in that first year that he was in St. Louis. But he had to be in his early 30s at that point, which is still freaking wild. And they're just like, no, we can absolutely put the corpse of Tristan Jarry in the net and it's going to work out fine for us. Honestly, they won't do it and he wouldn't go there. But trading for Jonathan Quick would not be the worst idea that Edmonton would have. He would be affordable. He's not going to want to do it. I don't blame him for not wanting to do it. But That
Would
would
you not
be
want to do it? A chance to be a starter again with limited work needed, in the sense that there's only, yes, you're going to be
a
rode
month.
through the
Yeah.
playoffs, but there's only a month of the regular season left. Get a
I don't
chance at a
think he
cup. He
wants
can come back to New York if he wants to.
I don't even think he wants to think about renting an apartment in Edmonton.
Sure. And I don't necessarily blame him for that. The question that I'm just asking in my head is, if Chris Drury went to Edmonton and said, hey, Igor Shesterkin would waive his no trade clause to go to you, how many first round picks would Edmonton give up to get Igor Shesterkin?
All of them.
Is 5 too many? I'm asking that seriously.
No. It's not too
Whatever
many.
the equivalent of the top offer sheet is would have to be the answer
Please.
to that question.
Well, that's 4. 4
Yeah.
is the top
It's at
of the
least
offer
4
sheet.
then.
But Shesterkin's not. You
But,
can't
like-
have him otherwise.
Yeah, but the obvious problem that I know there is they can't afford it.
Yeah, correct. The money. You'd have to take something else back, which
Like the Rangers would have to retain through like the entirety of that deal, which they're never going to do, or they're going to have to find some other team that is going to play the traditional role of the Arizona Coyotes and be just the team that everybody passes other players through in order to retain money on them.
Can't do that anymore in the CBA.
Yeah. Kyle Schnitzer asks, Sam Carrick seems to be the best culture guy on the team. Is it really worth it to trade him instead of keeping him to help the younger guys next season? He's only on the cap for $1 million. Yeah, I understand what you're saying, but the answer to that can't be that you only keep Sam Carrick, especially if he at this point could possibly bring you a second-round pick because he is your culture guy.
It's so fucking stupid we're
yeah.
even having this conversation, that this is
Isn't
an
it, though?
actual conversation we're having. Is Sam Carrick so critical to the culture of this piece of shit hockey team that you may not be willing to trade him for an obscenely high value of a second-round pick? And this is not a shot at you, Kyle. This is a legitimate question that you're asking. It is so stupid that we're here with this stupid hockey team.
Yep. And I would, if some team says to me, we'll retain money on it. Okay, I'll make Sam Carrick a $500,000 a year cap hit for you. Give me a second round pick for him. Great. Absolutely.
Another question from this Chip Cat.
You have to trade him, by the way. I realized I didn't answer the question.
You have
if
to
you
trade
get a
him.
second round pick for him, at this point, nothing is off the table.
Yeah.
Honestly,
especially because
you have to trade this Chip guy.
Especially, we got to trade the Chip
stuff.
guy for sure. Especially because the one thing that the Rangers have been good at producing is fourth line players. So they got an abundance there, and I'm sure some of them are probably even good for the culture.
They picked one up off waivers, which, by the way, a very good pickup in the scheme of
Seems, yeah.
If you're going to trade these players, you're going to need somebody to kill penalties.
Mm-hmm.
It makes sense.
The question from Chip. Is this season God's way of punishing Rangers fans for not acknowledging the utter greatness of Adam Fox? Or is it just because Joe touches himself?
Because you touch yourself at night.
Well, Joe?
My lawyer is telling me not to answer this question, so I plead the fifth.
Excellent.
Okay, Mr. President. And finally, should the Rangers get the 3 to, I guess it would be, if they pick in the 3 through 6 draft pick slots, should they go for a center or a defense?
Best player available.
Yeah.
Don't care about position. The Rangers need everything.
Sorry, that question is from Ulf and Anders. And yeah, I don't know at that point that it matters. Like at 3 to 6, take whoever is the best player on the board, whatever position they play.
Correct.
You're going to have some interesting debates at the top of the top couple players in this draft, depending on what your needs are. There's even some scenarios I've seen where Gavin McKenna is not the first overall pick. So I think that's good. That's kind of interesting. But the best case scenario, I think Gavin McKenna is the most talented player that is available. And I think you just got to start hoping that the Rangers luck into a high enough pick that they can take McKenna. And that concludes all of our questions.
Anything else, boys? Or we could put another hour and 40 minutes for you guys.
The one thing I will note, you're probably going to say this, Joe, but I'll just note it as well. If you are still listening to this, of course, this episode will come out on Thursday. We are recording it late on Tuesday night. If there are trades that happen, there will be emergency episodes of the podcast, as there is now a cat lurking over Chip's shoulder, which is hilarious. We will have some emergency, and we're going to try to do a recap, trade deadline recap episode for you after all of the dust settles. So there's more
Friday night. There's more
potentially Friday night. There's more audio content coming from us, so stay tuned for that.
Yeah, for sure. We're going to try to keep you on top of everything. We're utilizing Facebook a lot more, facebook.com/Blueshirt Banter, YouTube as well. You can find the podcast there. You can see the videos. You can actually see what Chip looks like with his Deep Seek. I'm pretty sure that's what it is. AI version. Yeah, thank you all for being here. Thank you all for listening. BlueshirtBanter.com. Please subscribe. Please join Blueshirt Banter. Either of the tiers, we would appreciate you. We love everybody who reads the website. We love everybody who listens to the show. But if you pay us money, we love you quite a bit more. Facebook.com/Blueshirt Banter, YouTube.com/Blueshirt Banter, Spotify, iTunes, 5 stars, subscribe, give us all the nice things. Other than that, you are on the roller coaster of life, my friends. By the time this episode comes out, what would truly suck is if Trocheck is traded before Thursday morning. If something big happens tomorrow, I don't know what we would do. We probably have to. This is my commentary to you that if that is the case, we're going to do it live. Thank you all for being here. Thank you all for joining. We will see you next week. Bye for now.